Lord hath given Nick. On the Lord hath given Nick. On the rickety low while living number one Nickelodeon.
You're listening to That's Pretty Dark,
the podcast where we talk about all of the entertainment that scared us as children
and still haunts us as adults. So grab your flashlight and join us as we take a frightfully nostalgic look over our shoulders.
And under our beds.
And in our closets.
And together we'll realize, whoa, that's pretty dark.
Pretty dark. Whew. Man.
Hey.
It's not Halloween for you, but it's Halloween for us.
That's right. Yeah, you're not listening to this on Halloween, but we are recording on Halloween because it seemed like a fun and spooky thing to do.
I can't think of anything else I'd rather do on Halloween than make our spooky podcast.
Right? We've taken you guys through October, through the spooky month, and like we mentioned, the spooks don't stop if you stick with our podcast.
Don't stop till you get enough. We'll never get enough.
No, we'll never get enough, but whether the listener will is still to be determined.
Just be glad I didn't say can't stop, won't stop.
Oh, well, now you have said that.
I'm going to see myself
out.
Yeah,
watch out, because I might start singing Miley Cyrus.
Oh, Lord. All
so
right.
Today, we're here to kind of, well, okay, I'll break this down for you guys.
Ooh, break it down.
We wanted to give you a background on the show that is going to serve as our first season binge.
Ding, 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 season binge.
Yeah. We've talked about doing season binges as part of this podcast where we kind of rewatch things that we watched growing up. And the first show that we're going to be taking that dive into is Are You Afraid of the Dark?
Oh, yeah. I'm so afraid.
I am too. I'm terrified. We know that there are like other Are You Afraid of the Dark podcasts out there that are just devoted to the show. And I mean, power to them because there's a lot to say.
We're joining the ranks.
Yeah, we're just joining the ranks. I mean, and there are other podcasts that are horror based. We know that. And we know that there are other like nostalgia based podcasts. And we think that is super, super cool.
Yep.
Honestly, I think, like, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think when we were first talking about making a podcast, one of the first things we said was, let's just do an Are You Afraid of the Dark rewatch podcast.
No, that's correct.
Yeah. Like, I think that was where our minds were.
That is the origins of our podcast, for sure.
Yeah. And then the more we talked, the more we realized we had a lot more to say and a lot more things we wanted to cover. So we decided to just incorporate that as part of the other content that we are going to make.
Absolutely.
And do some season binges of different shows that we love and that are pretty dark.
Yeah, all interspersed amongst the other episodes we're going to do. So we're not just going to stick with one thing.
Yeah, we didn't want to just do a season binge and that be every episode that you guys hear from now until, you know, we get done with the season.
Especially if you don't like the show. It's like, well, see you later.
Right? Yeah, so we wanted to intersperse it with other content. So you'll be getting bits and pieces of the season binge over the next few months as we, you know, release episodes. But all that being said, we're here today not to talk about an episode yet, but to kind of do an introduction to Are You Afraid of the Dark?
Yes.
Because as we started to plan out these episodes, we realized there was a lot to cover in terms of, you know, the cast and the Midnight Society and our favorite human, DJ McHale. So that's what we're going to get into today and indulge a little bit of that early Nickelodeon nostalgia with you guys.
Are You Afraid of the Dark is a Canadian-American horror anthology for children that aired on something called Youth Television, aka YTV in Canada.
I remember the logo.
Oh, yeah. And on Nickelodeon in the United States. It was created by our hero and champion, DJ McHale, and another fella named Ned Candle, who produced it alongside him for all those years.
I like that his name was Candle.
Yeah.
That seems appropriate.
It's fitting,
somehow.
right? Well, Candle with a K.
You guys will probably hear us talk about DJ McHale. We've talked about him before. We're going to talk about him today. And we're going to continually talk about him when we do our season binge of Are You Afraid of the Dark? So I thought it was an appropriate time to kind of give you guys some background on the legend that is DJ McHale, or at least more than I did in the Tower of Terror breakdown. So DJ McHale is an American writer-director, and he has done a lot, honestly, before Are You Afraid of the Dark that kind of led him to that point.
Really?
That I thought was pretty cool. Yeah, so he started early on. He did some like screenplays that aren't as well known that I could find, but then he worked on Encyclopedia Brown.
Encyclopedia Brown.
Yeah, it was this kids show that ran, I think it started in 89 and it ran on HBO. And it was all about this 10-year-old kid that was like solving crimes and stuff. And it was based on a book series from the 60s, which I feel like I read some of that in like elementary school.
Yeah, it sounds familiar.
It was kind of akin to like Nancy Drew, you know, and I don't
Yeah.
know, Hardy Boys, Boxcar Children.
Yeah.
But he did a whole series on it, and I've actually never seen it, which makes me feel like a bad DJ McHale fan. So I may have to look that up.
Add that to the list.
Right, add that to the always growing list of things to watch.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, DJ met Ned Candle on Encyclopedia Brown.
No way.
And I think he was producing on that. So I guess they just kind of worked
That's awesome.
well together. Yeah. But he then worked on Ghostwriter briefly.
Ghostwriter.
Right? It was, I mean, I
God.
think I've only maybe seen like one episode, but the concept of it always stuck with me because it's about, again, you know, a group of kids and they're like solving crimes, working with this ghost that's helping them.
Yeah.
And the ghost can only communicate with like written word, basically.
Always stuck with me.
So it's called Ghostwriter. But I mean, I thought that's such a fun way. Like he's always championing the children, you know, from the beginning.
Yeah.
And it's really clear to see from like those roots where like how he got where he ended up with Are You Afraid of the Dark, and how he became known for that type of content and that very specific brand of children's horror.
Yeah.
And like we talked about briefly in the Tower of Terror episode, but I found some really cool interviews with him. And he was mostly talking about Tower of Terror in those interviews, but he also mentioned some really cool stuff about his philosophies for directing and casting and writing on Are You Afraid of the Dark? So I think it'd be cool to talk about some of that too.
Yeah.
So in some of these interviews, DJ was asked about the lengths that he was allowed to go to in children's horror, like how many rules and regulations were kind of placed around him in the plot lines and the things he was allowed to show.
Yeah.
And
That's a good question.
In Tower of Terror and Are You Afraid of the Dark, he said that they never really went to the lengths to show blood or guts or anything like that. They were really cautious and thoughtful with a lot of the things that they did.
So there weren't many rules.
Although it was dark and they had to portray, you know, death and these really dark themes, they were really thoughtful about how they did it.
That comes through.
And he thinks that that's really what helped the networks have a lot of faith in him. And, you know, ultimately what gave him a lot of the freedom was his own personal convictions about how to manage it properly.
Wow.
But
very cool.
Obviously, it's still stuff that sticks in our mind. And he said that it was really important to him to go lean into the eerie and the haunting and the daunting sort of suspenseful nature and not the big jump scares and payoffs and gore.
Right.
He said that was really important to him and his brand of children's horror. And I think that's my favorite type of horror to this day.
Same.
In large part due to him. And thinking about how much, you know, how things are now, he said there probably are a lot more hoops to jump through nowadays, just in general, that's how things work. But he said that filmmaking was just handled a lot differently back then and they had a lot of trust in him. And it made me think about how crazy it is that his like personal decisions and convictions had like a very direct impact on like the psyche of a whole generation.
That's true.
Me and you and all the kids that grew up on these shows.
Wow. Yeah.
Those were his personal decisions about how to handle it. And that is what we were left with and how we think of horror, which is wild.
Thank you, DJ McHale.
Thanks, DJ. Thanks so much.
That is true. He did impact an entire generation.
I have friends that teach elementary school, particularly have a friend that teaches kindergarten. And I always think about my kindergarten teacher and how many things about my kindergarten and first grade teachers that like stuck in my brain. And you have a captive audience, right? You have these kids that have no choice but to sit and listen to you or sit and watch your shows. And you just don't even realize all the things that are sticking.
It's a lot of responsibility.
It's a lot of responsibility. And I thought it was really cool the way that he handled it.
Dig it.
And I don't think any of his decisions specifically really made me any worse for wear. Like there are some things that mess me up in children's horror. Obviously, that's why we're here.
Right.
And I think there are some things that probably did step over some lines, but I don't know that it was his projects that did that. He was always just towing the line, not getting across it.
Right. Now, according to the Orange Years documentary on Hulu, which you and I have both watched multiple times.
I think I've watched it 4 times.
Yeah. I've seen it at least twice. DJ said that Are You Afraid of the Dark was created to be part of a brand new program Nickelodeon wanted to introduce to preteens on Saturday nights called SNICK, aka exactly, Saturday Night Nickelodeon. And this was for kids who were, it's a paraphrase, but in his words, it was for kids who were too young to be out on Saturday nights, like on a date, he said, but too young to be, you know, in bed asleep at that hour. So
Yep.
it was just this like niche little time slot.
The sweet spot.
The sweet spot.
And I fell into that so perfectly.
Yeah.
Not right when he was making it. I was a little bit young. But like
Yeah.
in the years after, SNICK became a staple part of my bedtime, evening,
Absolutely.
routine.
Absolutely. And we discussed all the commercial bumpers in the
Oh, yeah.
Origins episodes. But like, yeah, this is where I think they first started to do a bunch of bumpers for SNICK specifically.
Nickelodeon. Nickelodeon.
It's really interesting how they did this. The original series itself, the first season, aired from 1992 to 1996. But the pilot itself, the one episode that they had made, had aired before 92. So this episode was called The Tale of the Twisted Claw, which ended up being episode 4 of the first season, right?
Yeah, that's right. It confused me every time I looked it up online when we were like prepping and planning.
I know.
It's like the title of that episode is like episode 4, like you said, but it was also the pilot episode. So
Yeah, totally.
the order got a little confusing.
Yeah, definitely. And it gets confusing in the actual like continuity of the show itself.
Right.
Because it falls in a strange place that we will discuss at length when we get to it.
Oh, yeah.
But so it was first aired on this youth television on YTV on Halloween night, 1990. It just feels like such a dark, ominous, but like special, magical night.
Right?
It feels like such a big night.
Just, yeah, 1990, everything feels dark and spooky.
Everything.
I wasn't even there yet. You weren't even there yet.
Mm-mm.
It's a time before us, so it feels magical.
Yeah, for sure. So, and it wasn't until a year later that this episode aired on Nickelodeon for the first time on October 25th, 1991. So I was like 6 months old, almost to the day.
Aw, bet you didn't see it.
No, I definitely didn't see
Bet
it.
you didn't catch it. You had a pretty full schedule at the time.
Yeah, I was pretty busy, had things to do. But on the 25th, it was part of a Halloween special that Nick was running that week. So it's really, really interesting. So it aired twice before it ever became part of a real season. I guess before it got the green light.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. I feel like that probably happens a lot. We don't know if it was picked up yet, but they had created that pilot, so they had it for Halloween, which is cool.
Yeah, totally.
2 years prior to this series,
Maybe Nick was like, yeah, sure, we'll run this. And then they just like tested it out on the whole American audience. I'm not sure.
I mean, but it was
the
kind of
U.S. audience.
It was kind of an avant-garde sort of thing they were doing, though. Like to have this block of programming that's SNICK, that is for an age group that other stations are not catering to at all.
Yeah.
So that's new. But then to also introduce this children's horror thing.
Right.
Like this is a whole new idea. So they probably did have some, not misgivings, but they probably did have some hesitation on like, how are kids going to feel about this,
For sure.
Like in the Orange Years documentary, I remember DJ McHale was talking about, it started out as like adaptations of fairy tales. And then I can't remember all the reasons why, but it turned into more like scary tales. Like,
Yeah.
Okay, well, we'd rather hear scary stories. And then that's where it evolved into the campfire and that whole like idea.
Oh, yeah.
But then the question was, like kids might like to see this, but will parents let kids watch this?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which is why they gave him a mandate that basically told him, you have to base this on classic literature, on something. And so, which is why, the Twisted Claw itself was based on the Monkey's Paw. And there was the Legend of Sleepy Hollow, The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of those episodes like that.
It's so wishbone.
Yeah.
Nickelodeon started out like its first roots were to be educational. And I think that carried over into a lot of the content that ended up on air. Even if it was kind of like, we should do this, but we'd rather make these fun, scary stories. So we're just going to do it the best way we can and make it educational-ish. And I guess he said too, like, we did this so that if we got pushback from the parents, we could say, what do you mean? This is classic literature.
Yeah, so they like knew it was going to be inappropriate and so scary and wrong. They're like, well, we need a fail-safe.
Yeah.
We need something to say. It's just good PR, I guess.
Yeah, that's totally marketing.
We're not going to fix the problem. We're just going to like talk around the problem and convince them that the problem isn't the problem.
We can acknowledge that it was potentially kind of a problem too.
No, it definitely messed me up. I mean, it gave me nightmares.
Same.
I had trouble sleeping as a kid because of the show.
Same.
But I would go back and watch it over and over and over again. I couldn't stop.
Couldn't look away. Couldn't help it.
Couldn't help it. It was a 2-hour block of time that SNICK ran on every Saturday night from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern time. So you and I grew up in Central time.
Yes.
So for us, it was from 7 to 9.
Yes.
So in my mind, I still separate my evenings as before 9 p.m. and after 9 p.m. to this day.
Because of SNICK.
I guess so. It had some sort of weird effect on me.
Yeah.
Because after 9, when SNICK was over, that was like, bedtime.
I have memories of that too, for sure. For my childhood, I think more back to because that was only Saturday nights,
Mm-hmm.
So I think the fact that Nick at Night was the block on the weeknights,
Right.
that's what I associate with my time in the evening.
Totally.
Because it was like Brady Bunch comes on at 8 p.m. and then I go to bed after that, But on Saturdays, I could stay up later. So, I got to see the SNICK till at least 9.
Yeah.
I got to see all the SNICK stuff.
And I loved the Nick at Night stuff too during the week, but those shows make me sad, I guess, because I associate them with bedtime. I don't
Bedtime, weeknights, like school nights.
Yeah.
A dark time.
At least Are You Afraid of the Dark, ending that night was like spooky, something fun, something to make you, give you a little bit something else to think about than just how you have to go to sleep. It's like, now I can't go to sleep because I'm terrified.
And also just the quintessential idea that you watched it on the weekend.
Yes.
Yeah.
It always hit different.
There's something nice about that too.
Yeah, for sure.
Clarissa explains.
SNICK. What's SNICK?
SNICK. Oh, yeah.
It's so very SNICK. Most prime and most SNICK.
Is SNICK a kind of cheese? Here's a true story of SNICK.
What is it, man?
SNICK is Saturday night, Nick.
SNICK.
Prime time for you.
Oh, joy!
And Nick will SNICK August 15th.
The night that SNICK premiered, they showed 2 network favorites, Clarissa Explains It All,
Love Clarissa.
and the Ren and Stimpy show.
Hate Ren and Stimpy.
Yeah. So
Sorry.
I loved Ren and Stimpy. And then it was the network premieres for both Roundhouse, which I never watched.
I loved Roundhouse. It was my favorite.
God, I was here for Roundhouse.
No, I've never seen it either. Sorry.
And then Are You Afraid of the Dark? And needless to say, Are You Afraid of the Dark was massively successful.
Massively successful.
This is what's come from Are You Afraid of the Dark? That fateful night in Canada, Halloween, 1990.
I love it. 2
revival series of the show.
Oh, yeah.
So 3
That's right.
complete, separate,
That's
with
right.
different Midnight Society members. A 1994 video game
Oh my gosh.
called Are You Afraid of the Dark? The Tale of Orpheo's Curse.
For what system?
Like Windows.
Oh.
Yeah, computer game.
Computer game?
It's insane.
How did I not play this? That's all I did as a child was play computer games and watch TV.
I don't know, but I think you still can.
A CD-ROM.
Well, it's like a website.
Oh my gosh.
So look it up. It's
That
cool.
is thrilling, and I'm so
Yeah.
excited to play that.
There's a board game, which I want. A series of audio cassette tapes where the actors reprise their roles to tell news stories and to voice act new narratives.
I need all of it. I need all of this.
And
every bit of it.
Last but not least, a series of 23 books written by various authors, 2 of which were adapted directly from the show, one being Cutter's Treasure and the other The Nightly Neighbors.
Oh, yeah.
All other 21 books apparently are original
Wow.
stories.
I feel like I've seen them over the years, but I may have owned a couple. I don't remember.
Apparently those were pretty successful. I would be interested in seeing those, but I also want to own all the Goosebumps.
All the
and
merch.
All of these
Yeah, I
books
need
and
all
everything.
this merch, man.
All the stuff, yeah.
I was too young to buy merch, really, when this first was around. But
I mean, we had the Scholastic book fairs, but I never saw those on Scholastic. I don't think those were Scholastics. They should have been.
it was some of the most educational stuff we watched, I'm sure.
Another really fun thing that we're going to see as we do our season binges of the show.
Yeah.
This show served as a proving ground for a lot of different child actors who are now quite famous people.
Yeah, absolutely.
The ones that stuck out to me were like Nev Campbell, Ryan Gosling,
Oh, I was about to say, yeah, Ryan Gosling.
Hayden Christensen, Alicia Cuthbert, and last but not least, Melissa Joan Hart.
Sabrina,
America's sweetheart, right?
America's Witch.
And just so many other people. Although a few of the characters and storylines tend to overlap throughout the course of the show, Are You Afraid of the Dark is an anthology-style show, meaning each episode is a brand new tale for us to listen to and enjoy.
Yeah.
But there are 2 layers to the show. There's the group of kids who meet in the woods and tell scary campfire stories. And there's the dramatization of these stories that we get to watch so that we don't just hear what they're saying, we get to actually see it happen. This is a group of teenagers. They're consistent characters, and they're called the Midnight Society, which is just the best name for a group of kids.
It's just fantastic.
There have been so many through the years. Even Stephen King's characters from It. They have the Losers Club.
Oh, yeah.
Which is pretty good. It's a pretty good one.
No, I still want to be in the Midnight Society. I might be in the Losers Club by default, but like
I think we were all in the Losers
Midnight
Club.
Society would be the aspiration.
So yeah, and they come together, which we're going to say Saturday nights because SNICK. Why not? And this is how they spend their time.
I liked to think, because I was a child, watching it originally, I liked to think they were in real time out in the woods while I was watching.
Oh, yeah?
It felt...
That's how I do things too.
Like that was my...
Yeah.
That was my imagination.
By the time I was watching it really extensively, because it scared me when I was very, very little. But by the time I was able to watch it with regularity, I watched a lot of reruns throughout the week.
Yeah, same.
It ran like in the afternoon, right after school.
Yeah.
So my memory with this show is like coming home, immediately making a batch of chocolate chip cookies, and then just watching like 2 episodes, like an hour of Are You Afraid of the Dark, basically.
I guess that's true. Like I do remember watching it on SNICK vaguely. I was very young.
Yeah.
But
I remember being like, new episode on Saturday. Woo.
Yeah.
They were not just classics. Sometimes they were fairy tales, which sometimes had morals and some don't. And then there were also urban legends, things that may or may not be true. Some do have foundations in truth, which is why they're stories that exist, and it's super scary. But a lot of the time, they were based on events and things happening to the Midnight Society members themselves, like from their life, like a problem at school, or like notably, I think one of the kid, David, I think his bike gets stolen at some point. He tells a story about the shiny red bicycle and things like that. So the purpose this served was so that each of these campfire stories, they had a purpose and a motivation behind its telling, which is what makes the stories relatable.
Sure. Yeah. I think I remember from that documentary, they were talking about like they wanted some of this to be grounded, in reality that kids could relate to and understand. And at the time, Jerry, the president of Nickelodeon, like amazing woman, like all hail, because she really paved the way for everything in children's entertainment. But they were doing a lot of research where they were talking to kids, and they weren't saying, do you like these shows or this show, or what do you like more? They were saying, what's going on with you? What's it like to be your age?
Yeah, yeah.
And so a lot of, the live action shows and cartoons at the time were grounded in that. And Are You Afraid of the Dark is no exception.
Right, exactly.
Are you watching Are You Afraid of the Dark? In the dark? Well, what are you afraid of? What's so terrifying about tales of the unknown, the unseen, and the undead? After all, there is nothing in the dark that isn't there in the light. Or is there? Tune in for another tale of Are You Afraid of the Dark? Tomorrow at 7:30, 6:30 Central on Nickelodeon.
Because the real terror never begins until night falls.
So a little bit of fun Are You Afraid of the Dark trivia and lore. There were 91 episodes total, which means 91 campfires.
91 campfires.
That's right.
91 total episodes. It came out in 1991. Or it didn't, it started in 1991, the pilot. Anyway.
91 of these. And never once do we see the Midnight Society light the campfire.
Really?
Did you ever notice that?
No.
Not a one time. And this is because Nickelodeon didn't want to teach children how to use matches.
Of
and
course.
Therefore inspire them to start fires in their own homes.
I understand that.
Something like that. Yeah.
I'm actually grateful.
This is another thing that I always wondered. And I found this vulture.com article, which is an interview with DJ McHale. It's like 13 things you should know about Are You Afraid of the Dark? It's really fascinating. I mean, this answered a lot of questions that I had.
So they are really things you should know. It's not just clickbait.
Yeah, no, these are not just clickbait. So go read the article if you just even a passing interest in the show or DJ as a filmmaker will find you some interest in that article for sure. Nice. But this stuck out to me because I always wondered about the campfire sequences, like where they were shot, how they were shot. So according to DJ, these were shot in a studio in Quebec.
Really?
Yeah, they rented the space.
Okay. I guess so.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense, right? I guess I would have thought Montreal.
I just pictured them outside, obviously, always. But there's no way that could happen.
I guess in my mind, I always knew it was a studio. I mean, as an adult filmmaker, I've known, I was like, well, that has to be a studio. There's no way.
I kept up hope that they were actually in the woods. But yeah, of course not.
I mean, it looks pretty authentic.
They had too many scenes to shoot there. Yeah, as a filmmaker, there's no way that they could do that.
They must have dressed it using real materials, like real plants and such, which is why it looks so real. Because, he said by the time they were done filming, it was all pretty dry and brittle and gamey. And so they would rent the space in the studio, dress it, and film every campfire scene for a season up front and in bulk.
That makes sense.
The number given in the article was 7 days. So I guess they start a new season, they go film for like a week, and then they're done with the campfire scenes.
Yeah, of course.
So
Makes
if you're any good at math, that's 2 episodes per day.
I'm not good
for a
at math,
season.
and I still figured that out.
Right. So that doesn't leave a lot of margin for error.
No.
Especially considering that all the episodes had to be written in their entirety, and the continuity between the storytelling scenes and the dramatizations of the episodes had to be seamless.
Yeah. Man, that's a rough job for Scripty.
Yes, for Scripty, and DJ as the showrunner, he said this made his job very hard because once it was shot and the set was vacated, there was no going back and rebuilding that set. It was done. The Midnight Society members, they changed per revival. Like when there was a new release of the show, there were new members. But the original members are as follows. There's Gary, sort of the leader of the group.
That's right.
He's played by Ross Hull. And he was on the Orange Years documentary. And I think he's a cool dude.
Yeah, he is.
He seems just so like put together and fine.
He does. I don't know. I've always loved him. And Ross Hull specifically, this Gary person, I think was just so well cast. Because you have this automatic respect for him. He seems, he's maybe a tad bit older. Like he's one of the older members. But you respect him. As a little child, like you're going to listen to what he has to say.
He's like a born leader.
Yeah.
I feel like he's like running for SGA.
Oh yeah, he would totally be the SGA president. Absolutely.
But he's like a science guy and he's like into stuff, but he's cool.
Yeah.
People like him.
Yeah.
He's funny.
People listen when he speaks.
He's just put together.
Yeah, and but he's got the butt cut, the classic 90s butt cut and glasses. And so he's like probably a little different, a little alternative, definitely the kind of kid that I would get along with. Love Gary.
So he's had a pretty good like life. Notably, he was on Stargate Atlantis at one point. And like a smattering of other things. There you go. First use of the word
smattering. He promised that he was going to use that word. So keep track, folks.
So many times, yeah. But he's well educated and he's like a meteorologist.
I did not know that. Oh, man.
The guy's awesome.
I like him even more now. One of my best friends is a weatherman, and they're, in general, the weathermen that I know, which not that many, but still, they're the nicest people in the world.
I don't know, weather or not, they're good people.
Oh, please.
But boy, they sure know how to tell a story.
They do. At least Gary does.
And Thomas does too.
And Thomas,
he's
the weatherman, that's my
guy.
Best friend. He can tell us.
He's funny.
He can tell a good story and he can tell a good weather.
Yeah, exactly. So next, this is in no apparent order. This is just the order I found online multiple times. So Betty Ann is next.
Yeah.
She's played by Rain Pear Cool.
Hope that you said it right.
Another smattering of things. A lot of these actors did, they were given credit for a lot of the same thing, like additional crew or additional voice acting for like Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone.
Yeah, I noticed that too.
I don't get it, but I don't know if that's true.
I would like it to be true, so let's just assume that it is.
Betty Ann is like kind of the quiet. I mean, she's cute. She smiles a lot.
She's really enthusiastic about the stories.
She's really
too.
enthusiastic.
Like she has that like fire in her eyes about the stories. She's about it. She likes being part of the Midnight Society.
I think she's different in the Midnight Society from who she is in real life.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of them are very much who they are, but I think she comes and is like, this is my chance to be like brave and enthusiastic. Whereas normally
and care
she's
about
quiet.
something.
I think so.
Yeah.
But that's just my read. Kiki is Jodie Rester. She's done a lot. She's voiced a character on the PBS cartoon Arthur.
Yeah, that's right.
She also released an R&B soul album called Real.
Hey.
Kiki is super like in your face, kind of punky. She likes to pick on you and laugh like with you.
Mm-hmm.
Like she's not mean. She's a jokester.
Yeah.
She likes to joke around. So she's
gonna like razz people.
Yeah.
Get them going.
Yeah. But it's because she likes you. Whereas there's Frank, who doesn't like anybody.
Yeah.
He's played by Jason Alisharan, and he's done a few things, including produced a movie called A Single Man, starring Colin Firth and Julianne Moore.
Wow. Producer creds.
And he's the like kind of the bad bully.
Yeah.
He picks on you, he makes fun of you, and it's not really endearing. I think deep down.
Well, it's his like reflex, right? It's his, persona. It's the idea that he needs to project.
Yeah, it's a defense mechanism. Right. So he's always kind of harsh and mean. And it's funny because I'll mention this when you do the Phantom Cab because that's his story when he tells it.
I was literally about to say.
And it's just full of these sweet, sweet burns.
Mm-hmm. The whole thing.
Next, we have Kristen, played by Rachel Blanchard, however you want to say it. And, she was in a little something called Clueless. I don't know.
No big deal.
Never heard of it, really.
Crazy.
She had an amazing career. She's done a lot of stuff. She's the blonde, pretty girl, a lot of focus on her.
Yeah. She's a star.
Yeah, she's one of the stars.
She's
and then
so
she leaves
lucky.
and does other stuff.
Star.
Then we have David, who's played by Nathaniel Moreau. He's done a larger smattering of things. Before this, he was in the 1988 to 1989 War of the Worlds TV series.
Wow.
Along with Rachel Blanchard.
I love that so many of them also did these kind of alternative type shows.
And there's a bunch I didn't write down because it would get too much. Even this is kind of lagging a little bit. And then there's, oh my gosh, my personal favorite.
Oh, here we go.
Not necessarily of the characters, but I think this makes me like him more. So Eric is the blonde little curly-headed boy, and he's really just funny. He's a lot of comic relief, I would say, because he's just kind of silly and just also makes fun of you, but as a nerd. And Eric is played by a guy named Jacob Tierney. And Jacob is the co-creator and writer and director of a little show called Letterkenny.
Oh!
That I love.
No wonder
so
I recognize
much.
his name.
And he created it with Jared Kiso, and he plays Pastor Glenn that I can't think about without laughing, which is a homosexual, nymphomaniacal, evangelical preacher from the American South.
Of course.
It is great.
Of course. Man, so many people have told me to watch Letterkenny. I need to get on it. That show is great. Go, Eric. Go. He grew up good.
And now that I watch it, I'm like, dude, I can see Pastor Glenn.
Oh, wow.
And little Eric. And it's so scary.
That's what this podcast is about, man. All those layers that make you who you are. Not that he is a homosexual pastor, but
That's the Midnight Society.
Love those guys.
Love those guys. They're great.
Some of my best friends from childhood.
And we'll be with most of them for 5 seasons.
And me and you and every other child that
and
watched.
all of you.
Yeah. Everybody that watched the show and felt these things right along with them. Yeah, we were there. We may not have gotten our time to tell our tale yet, but that's what we're here to do because we couldn't help but pursue that dream in this form.
Yeah, we had to. We had to contribute to the Midnight Society.
It's been killing me for 2 decades, almost 3.
Yeah, I'm waiting to be sponsored in the Midnight Society and tell my story. And I'm also waiting on my letter in the mail from Hogwarts. All right. And my golden ticket and everything else. I'm waiting for it. I will be here when it arrives.
Yeah, we'll still be here. We're not going anywhere.
Some stories can only be told at night, and the Midnight Society is telling them. Watch Are You Afraid of the Dark? Tonight at 9:30, 8:30 Central, only on SNICK.
In the 90s, at that point in time, you really had the 2 big networks competing were Disney and Nickelodeon. And obviously, DJ's shows were on Nickelodeon.
Yeah.
His show, I should say. His episodes, all the casting that he was doing was for Nickelodeon. And he said that it often, because they had to cast a lot, right? And it's an anthology show, so they're casting people every week, pretty much, for the roles on Are You Afraid of the Dark?
Right.
And he said that it almost got to the point where it was annoying because Nickelodeon was so, at that time, so dedicated to being the anti-Disney, the little more rough around the edges, a little less polished sort of thing. He said that they would audition kids for Are You Afraid of the Dark? And the producers would say, he's too Disney. She's too Disney.
Oh,
and
God.
DJ said that it used to frustrate him because a lot of times they were talented. They were actors that he wanted to work with. And he said one of the best examples of that really ended up being Ryan Gosling. And Ryan Gosling appeared on an episode of Are You Afraid of the Dark? One of my favorite episodes of all time, The Tale of Station 109.1. Love that episode.
It's great.
And DJ talked about working with him, but he also ended up getting picked up on the Mickey Mouse Club. And so he worked over there at Disney. So he kind of did both, straddled the line a little bit. But DJ said that didn't happen very often, just based on the way that Nickelodeon wanted to portray their shows at the time.
Yeah.
And then DJ kind of made me laugh because in the interview when he was talking about working with Ryan Gosling, he said, I think Mickey Mouse Clubhouse maybe did 2 seasons, and he's like, Are You Afraid of the Dark didn't get canceled after 2 seasons. he was a little bit proud, which I appreciate.
Well, that's great. I mean, I feel that frustration because it was the 90s. It was a kid show.
The reason that frustrated him, so he got to use Ryan as the main character on one of the anthology episodes where he was in the story within the story. But he originally wanted to cast Ryan Gosling as David in the Midnight Society.
No way.
And that's the reason he wasn't able to, is because Ryan Gosling was working with Disney.
That would have been cool.
Mm-hmm.
Man, that's so frustrating.
I know. There's just
I
so
get
much.
that. Like,
I totally understand it. I mean, I can't, like, from a network perspective, I get it. And even more so nowadays, like, if I was making a TV show and a kid was quote unquote too Disney, like, I would be able to tell and I wouldn't like it.
sure. Yeah.
There's a polished element.
But they probably were more talented than a lot of the kids they got to be on Are You Afraid of the Dark?
Sure. And that's kind of the thing. I mean, we could get into theory and casting and how and why you would cast. Like, I love the idea of casting. I wanted to be a casting director for a really long time. I've really enjoyed every casting process I've been able to be a part of on the projects that I've done. It's just fun to kind of match the right personalities together.
You picked me, so
I did. I cast you.
That's how we met.
Yeah, that's how we met, is because I cast you in something. I love that whole process, but I can totally see how it would get kind of difficult. And then a lot of those kids that are too polished are almost doing so because they have a certain awareness and they're trying to bring something to the table. So sometimes you can probably mold that into, you know, what you need it to be.
So like you said, DJ and Ned Kendall met on Encyclopedia Brown, which I had, no idea that show even existed. But that's kind of where their working relationship started. And apparently early on, they realized that they worked well together. So they were trying to develop, I guess, their own concept of like children's entertainment and what that should look like and what that should be.
They succeeded. They branded a whole
Absolutely
decade, basically.
DJ and Ned Kendall sort of developed the idea for the show together. Its origins.
I think I remember DJ saying that on the Orange Juice.
Yeah, they were trying to figure out what it was supposed to be. And so as the writer-director type, DJ took on the more like creative reins, right? The creative process. And he ended up becoming the actual showrunner for the duration.
He did what I wanted
which
to.
is what you want to do, exactly.
Yeah.
He became the showrunner for the duration of the first run of the show, the first 5 seasons. So he was super hands-on. He said mostly in the first season, but he still stayed pretty hands-on.
Yeah. I mean, you can feel it. You know what I mean? Like, there are a lot of shows that are directed by different people, and you can feel how it loses the touch of the person that was directing it before.
Right. Absolutely.
But it all feels pretty consistent when it comes to Are You Afraid of the Dark?
And that's mostly because even if he directed a bunch of the episodes, but not all of them.
Right.
But even so, even if he didn't write the script for an episode, he usually went back over a script that somebody else wrote and rewrote it. Like, he basically took their idea and then made sure it fit his vision.
Yeah, either he said it somewhere or I read that somewhere. But yeah, I read that too. I was like, I get it.
Yeah, totally.
He kept control.
It was funny because he was like, so if you loved the show, you can thank me. And if you hated it, you can blame me. That was pretty funny.
Well, hey, I thank you, DJ.
Yes, we all are thanking
thank
you here, DJ. Yes. It's really interesting how that all came about, really, those early days, because DJ had been developing the show for a while before Nick ever wanted it. They actually turned it down the first time he ever pitched it to Nickelodeon.
I feel like I hear that story.
Yeah, right. It's so common.
Things just don't. And it's so crazy to me because I think of these things as fixtures, and it's like, I can't imagine life if they hadn't happened.
Right.
But so many things, y'all, are so close to not happening. It's a wonder anything ever does.
I know. And also, don't give up on your dreams. If you believe in something, keep going.
Yeah, really, pursue
it. Keep pushing it. That's what we're doing. That's why we're here right now.
That's why we're sitting here.
So it sat in a pile in the Nickelodeon studio for a year or two, a while before.
Was this just the concept, the treatment for it, or the pilot itself?
I am unsure because I now have some conflicting information about the actual year. He was saying 1991 that Nick picked it up. So the pilot aired for the first time in 1990. So, hey, maybe they filmed the pilot themselves. Maybe they funded it and got it made and they pitched the pilot. So that could be. I don't know if it was just the treatment or if it was maybe both. Here's the pilot and here's our idea for the whole season.
To me, I can see it as a treatment. Granted, I would pick it up immediately because it appeals to me. But
sure,
I can see as a treatment people being hesitant to pick it up. But once you've done the pilot, I feel like it's such a clear winner for a network or for a production company.
Yeah,
that it would be hard to turn it down. So.
And that was it. Yeah, they were like, you can't scare children. He was like, yes, I can, and stormed out. So thank you for scaring us.
Yeah.
So it's funny because like it sat in this pile of unselected, ideas. And there was just one of these magical moments where a Nick studio executive picked it up and was like, hey, this is great. Why aren't we making this show? And so when DJ came back in a while later to pitch another show concept, I think it was Crisscross.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They were
I
like,
read about Crisscross.
well, we don't want your new idea, but can we make this older one you had?
Oh my God.
It's so insane. He was like, yeah, you can make that.
Of course you can. You could have done it a long time ago. Sure.
He also said that once they wanted the show, they didn't like the name he had, which was Scary Tales. I know you've touched on that a little bit.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So he was going to call it Scary Tales.
I mean, I think that's cute. Whatever.
I mean, it's fun, but they were like, make it more unique, more Nickelodeon. So as he got to thinking about how to do that, he remembered the Dr. Seuss story named What Was I Scared Of? So DJ, and thinking about that was like, well, when I was a kid, I was afraid of clowns and the dark. So in a way, the title, Are You Afraid of the Dark, is something of an answer to Dr. Seuss's question. What was I scared of? The dark. Are you afraid of the dark?
He's asking a whole generation.
Right. I thought that was really cool.
To which we all said, hell yeah, we are.
Yeah, hell yeah, I'm scared of the dark.
Of course.
And thanks to you, DJ McHale.
Mm-hmm.
Are You Afraid of the Dark ended up being produced by Nickelodeon and a Canadian production company called Sinar Films. And part of this deal with Sinar was that the show had to be produced and filmed in Canada.
Oh, okay.
So that's already answering a bunch of questions.
About why it was filmed in Canada?
Yeah, basically. But in their mind, this was an effort to sort of build out the Canadian film industry, which at the time was pretty weak, but since then has exploded and is now quite massive.
Yeah. To be honest, when we learned that it was filmed in Canada, which I'm sure I had heard in the past at some point, but when I saw that, it didn't surprise me at all. Because in this day
a lot
and
of
age,
shows ended up being made
everything's
there.
in Canada. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think Supernatural filmed almost exclusively in Canada, like big, long running show.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I mean, so many others.
This is why there's going to be a lot of crossover of talent and writers and filmmakers and composers, because Sinar hired a lot of the same people for a lot of different projects, depending on where they fit best and where they were needed most. Like Arthur specifically is one of the ones we see over and over. A lot of these kids,
that's true. You're right.
like voice act on Arthur, and a lot of the, these composers worked on a lot of other kid shows like Arthur, things like that.
Wow. So that's where they all came from.
It's where it all came from. Just this deal, basically. I mean, Sinar made a bunch of different shows, but this is why specifically Are You Afraid of the Dark?
I mean, that's where the connections
That's
were
where all
made.
these connections are being made. Right.
Yeah.
Nickelodeon wants you to know that not all the scenes in Are You Afraid of the Dark are scary. For example, in this scene, just a boy listening to the radio. Ow! Okay, skip that. Well, right here, just a girl with a flashlight. Wow! Next, okay, not a bit scary here with the glasses. Wow! All right, it's a little scary, but if it wasn't, you'd have no excuse to hide under the furniture. Watch Are You Afraid of the Dark? Tonight at 9:30, 8:30 Central, only on SNICK.
You ready to geek out about the intro?
Oh, I am always ready to geek out about the Are You Afraid of the Dark intro.
This is it.
There are a few things in life I love more, honestly, than the intro to the show.
It is just the most perfect compilation of images I think I've ever seen.
They really knew what they were doing.
They did. So you can't talk about the intro to the show without first discussing the theme song.
Central part of what made it
so
so iconic and spooky.
I mean, talk about an iconic sound.
If you hear that sound, like the first notes of that song, it transports you immediately.
It does.
Which is what music is for.
It sends a shiver down my spine, puts a little, I don't know, twinkle in my toes.
Twinkle in your toes?
That was the wrong phrase. Yeah,
Twinkle
sure.
in your eye?
Puts a glisten in my eye, a little tear. So this theme was composed by a guy named Jeff Zahn, or Zan. I think it's Zahn.
Zahn sounds cooler.
Jeff Zahn is an award-winning music supervisor and composer. He's produced a lot of stuff.
Really?
He's worked with like the Backstreet Boys, Wyclef Jean, Art Garfunkel, Yo-Yo Ma.
Wow.
Like a lot
He's
of people.
like a music producer.
Producer and a composer. So he's actually worked on a bunch of other famous shows and movies and such.
Wow.
He did music for Paddington Bear, Richard Scarry.
I love Richard Scarry.
Right, me too. Some of my earliest memories come from Richard Scarry.
Me too, for sure.
He did music for Barney and Sesame Street.
Well, he soundtracked the childhood of everybody that grew up in the 90s.
Yeah, right. And as far as films go, like other films, he did one called Twinkle Toes.
No way.
Oh, no way.
Serendipity.
I didn't know that. I'm reading this list right now. And he did Spookily the Square Pumpkin, which I've never seen, but I've seen it. Like, I've seen it around.
It sounds like something that you would enjoy.
And Jeff Zahn also, which I thought this was kind of like, it's impressive, but humorous still.
Okay, I'm ready for it.
He played cello on Broadway in the orchestra for Cats.
Oh my God, really?
Yeah.
I love that.
That's so funny to me. I don't know why. It's like, it's crazy impressive. And yet I'm still just like, oh, that's kind of cute.
You know what's, as you say that, it's crazy. I don't feel like I've ever looked at the career of anybody that was a Broadway, like an orchestral performer on Broadway.
And we should.
I know.
Right?
I mean,
because these people are incredible.
I don't know who played the guitar in Rent, but that person has my heart forever.
Yeah.
In the original,
of course.
Jonathan Larson, Rent. Like, I don't think about those guys, but they deserve credit too.
Be inspired. Look at you. Look at what we're doing here. We're making some good stuff.
We are.
So that was just part of his like extensive career. So before he really got into entertainment, he was just playing cello around the world as this incredible, performer and musician.
Amazing.
So he ended up meeting and working under the legendary kids television composer, Joe Raposo, who, if you don't know, wrote the Sesame Street theme song.
That's who that is.
Yes.
I was like, where is that name from?
This guy did a lot of stuff, but that's more or less how Zahn got his in with that aspect of the industry, like children's entertainment.
Man, can you imagine just being like a huge successful cellist, like a concert cellist, and then being a Broadway cellist and just like going to a Broadway theater every night for your job? And
amazing.
Then being like, oh, I'll get into kids entertainment. And then just like scoring children's
and
stuff.
Now he's done not even just children's stuff, but all kinds of things. I mean, not just for kids, for adults, whatever. He's all over the place now.
I wish I was a musician. Truly, I do.
So now they're working together. And when Raposo died, Zahn took over a lot of his contracts because he was his go-to guy, right? Mm-hmm. And one of the most significant ones to us is the show Madeline.
Yeah.
And this was being made by a company in Montreal called Sinar Films, which we've now discussed.
It does all connect, doesn't it?
So, they ended up co-producing Are You Afraid of the Dark alongside Nickelodeon, which is how he came to do the music for it.
They brought him.
Sinar hires Zahn to do the theme. And he meets with DJ and Ned Candle, and they're talking about what they're going to do and how cool it's going to be.
I wish I could have been in that meeting.
I know, like a fly on that wall, right?
Yeah.
He just immediately got started thinking about what the theme was going to be and what he wanted to do with it. And, like these things do, like how genius happens. He said he's just sitting in an airport in Montreal waiting on his flight, and it just hits him. He just starts humming this theme in his head. He's sitting there thinking about like mystery and children's horror and like all this whole concept of what they're going to do. Like it just came to him.
Wow.
And he's had to scribble it down on a napkin so he could get home and begin working on it. I thought that was so fun.
That is fun. Wait, so this is Zahn that it came to him.
Yeah.
It's so funny because I feel like DJ describes like a lot of his best ideas as hitting him like that, coming out of the blue, like the muse just is like attacks you kind of.
Yeah.
I love that. I love hearing stories about that because it makes me feel like it's all the more possible.
Yes.
When I often feel it is impossible, but it's happened to me too. That's something that happens to artists.
Another reason to get out of the house and live your life every once in a while.
I know. And I mean, you're diligent about it. Like you're the kind of writer that will just write whether you feel it or not. I'm the kind of writer that has to have that sort of inspiration before I can do anything.
Well, I used to be.
Man, it's tough.
I mean, you got to work through that, but yeah. It's all it, but how you get inspired and how things hit you. It's unique to each person. So.
It is. And it's just really important. But I love that he was in an airport.
Yeah, he's just sitting there minding his own business, thinking about the job, and he's just like, boom, there it is.
Okay, cool. Here, we got it.
He said that they had already been talking about what they were going to do for the individual episodes. He was like, I'm sure we discussed the theme at some point, but we were mostly just talking about music for the show. So he's thinking, who's gonna do the music? And he wanted to hire a couple of other composers to sort of take the bulk of the work, and he would direct the whole process. So
when you think about it, that's a lot of music to write.
It's a lot. It really is. And DJ had said that in this other interview, they didn't just like create and keep a library of music to use over and over. He said each episode was scored individually. So it's all unique to the episode, which is
that's amazing.
Another layer of authenticity that makes the show so great and memorable.
I would like to look into like the statistics about how often that happens because I feel like that's not common. It's at least not anymore.
One of the composers that they ended up hiring was a guy that Zahn had already worked with a few times on other shows, and his name is Jeff Fisher. And he had a major influence on the end result of the main theme as well. Because once Zahn had the melody and the theme in his mind, they went into the studio together to finish, to like do the final recording. So yeah, Zahn gave him a lot of credit for the complete final theme that we all know and love. We have just as much to thank, Fisher for as Zahn, honestly.
Wow. Well, hey, thanks to both of you guys.
Thank you, Jeffs.
Thanks for existing. Thanks for caring and loving your job so much.
Yeah, and Fisher himself went on to score 48 episodes in total.
Wow.
Which is the most number of episodes that any of the composers scored.
So he knew what he was doing.
He knew what he was doing. He was the main go-to guy.
Wow.
The other composer they hired was a guy named Raymond Fabi. And he himself scored 32 episodes.
Wow.
He had also done work on Arthur and was the music orchestrator for the film Holes.
Are you kidding me? I watched Holes like 2 days ago. Not even joking.
Really?
I went to sleep and I turned on Holes because that's what I do when I need
so
to
he
go
had
to
a
sleep.
big part in the music for that.
That's amazing.
There you go.
I mean, that soundtrack is pretty iconic. I mean, for people that grew up in that time.
Right. No, I loved that movie. So there are 4 other composers who have music credits on IMDb for the show. However, they only have like 14 episodes between them. So we'll take a closer look at those composers as we come across them in our binges.
I often think of the people that scored and soundtracked like the shows and movies that I watched as a kid. That had maybe more of an effect on me than anything else.
Well, yeah, we talk about that as filmmakers. I mean, we know the importance of sound. Sound affects like 90% or something, some crazy percentage of how you perceive visuals.
Sure, because if you're in a conversation and, it's an ominous conversation, but the words sound perfectly normal, but the sound is different, and that's what clues you in.
Exactly.
That's what tells you, it gives you your cues. And I mean, I don't know if it's because of my anxiety disorder or, my social anxiety or whatever, but like I'm always looking for those context clues.
Oh, yeah.
Anytime I can grab onto them, I'm like, now I know what I'm supposed to be thinking, or now I know what this person means in life. And then in film, I think that's part of why it hits me so hard.
I wish it happened in real life.
Yeah. Oh, that'd be
so
fantastic.
Could know how to like proceed through an evening. Like a date's going bad.
Oh, and you can hear the sound effects
it's like,
in the
please,
music.
Can the music just shift?
Yes.
Like, womp womp. Can I just like something, please tell me.
I've wanted that my whole life. We've all been in the car, looking out the window, listening to Hilary Duff and thinking that we're the main character. And
Hilary Duff, man, in my ears.
The sound does it. Hilary Duff specifically.
While you afraid of the dark will rise to SNICK again after this.
So you're sitting there, you got your blankets on your bed, you probably got some snacks, you probably got your popcorn or your cookies like I had.
Some popcorn.
You turn your lights off, you got just the glow of the television like it's Poltergeist.
Yep.
And you're just sitting there. And that music starts, and the first thing you see is the vacant boat rocking in the water. That just kind of like ominous, like it's kind of foggy.
And the whale sounds. What the whales, the
whale?
Whoa, like the
ominous, music, you mean?
The music, but I call them, I call those whale sounds. And I do that when we've talked about like in filmmaking, the soundtracks of things that we've started to make. It's this sad, wistful sound that you heard on the Discovery Channel documentary about whales when you were a child. Probably.
Oh, yeah.
The sound of the whales, just they wail through the water, and it's this distant, haunting sound. And that's all throughout, but especially in the intro. Sorry, go ahead. Describe the intro. We were watching it. The whales are sounding. The boat is rocking.
The boat is rocking on the rocks. And then you cut to this lone swing set. Empty swings, you got leaves blowing in the wind, and you got the one swing creaking back and forth, right?
Yep. The ghost is swinging in that swing.
The shutter cracking against the window pane with the storm, lightning's flashing. You go into the dark attic.
You can hear the sounds of the boards creaking under your feet.
And then you cut from this dark, spooky attic to the clown toy looking at you. Super scary. And it's all in like this weird, poor slow motion from like filming things on like video.
Kind of jerky. Yeah, it's as if a home movie kind of.
Yeah, it's that kind of like poor quality that just like still makes it weirdly tangible.
Yeah, I was going to say tangible, tactile. Those are great words to describe it.
And then you see the metal box fan swirling and it's like cutting the light. And then you see the bedroom door, that quick push up to the bedroom door with the light coming out through the keyhole.
Something's coming, I think, is the...
It's pretty spooky.
Something spooky.
It's spooky because you have all these images, these visuals of like loneliness, isolation, darkness. The lights are out. You're alone. That door, I was like, in my mind, I was like, what is that door? And then rewatching it, I'm like, that's just like a kid's bedroom. And then, of course, last but not least, you've got the iconic hand holding the match.
That's right.
That sparks to life. And from that light, it illuminates the title of the show against the black background. And there it is. Are you afraid of the dark? And yes, we are.
Oh,
we are so afraid of the dark.
I've answered back to that many times. As a child, I would be like, I am. Yes.
Absolutely.
That's me.
Absolutely. Once the flame is lit, it's lowered out of sight. And then you see the trail of smoke behind it.
So iconic. There are a few things from my childhood, like visually, that have stuck with me, like this intro.
Now, that's a pretty great intro, right?
The greatest.
Yeah.
One of the greatest of all time.
There are 2 other alternative intros that we should at least talk about.
Wait a second. Have I seen them, do you think?
I don't know if you have.
Would they have aired?
One of them you can find online and one of them you can't.
Okay.
So the one you can find is a legitimate alternative that I think was just probably the original intro before it got all fancy and good.
Okay. Before they had the budget to evolve it or whatever.
This intro is very basic. You see the sky. It's like a blue sky. This door appears and the door opens and you pass through this threshold kind of into the Twilight Zone-esque of a moment because then it's all black and there's a bunch of swirling ghosts and these...
That sounds vaguely familiar.
Yeah. These ghosts then sort of dissipate and the title of the show appears with a very different theme.
Okay.
And then the show begins. It lasts probably 15, 20 seconds. It's very, very strange.
Yeah. Maybe this was like the low budget before we know for sure how many episodes are going to get, picked up kind of thing.
Yeah. Shouldn't spend all this money if we don't need it yet. But the other intro you cannot find is something of a Mandela effect.
Oh, I feel like all these kind of are because it's kind of something I see in my head, but I don't remember where or how.
There are many people on Reddit who claim to have seen the intro that we all know, but they have additional clips. Specifically, a lot of people say they remember seeing a playground carousel spinning by itself, as well as a Jack-in-the-Box.
I've seen a Jack-in-the-Box.
I've seen the playground carousel spinning by itself.
I've seen a Jack-in-the-Box. That's not in the intro at all?
No.
Why do I know that it was?
Well, some people say they think it's because there was like the clown in the attic smiling down at you,
Yeah.
But it's just a clown doll. It's not a Jack-in-the-Box.
Oh, but I remember it as a Jack-in-the-Box. That is
Isn't
wild.
that weird?
I know it was. That's crazy.
Yeah, it's super weird. So, there's a whole thread on Reddit you can read about people are trying to give like, maybe it's this, maybe it's this.
I remember the Jack-in-the-Box and like a laugh from the clown in the Jack-in-the-Box.
I think there's a giggle somewhere in there with the clown, but
yeah.
I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe I'm making that up too. People are like, it's out there. We've seen it somewhere, but we don't know what it is.
Weird.
So if you guys know what we're talking about.
Remember like a carousel horse, like in the darkness.
Not a horse, like playground metal ones. The ones that get way too hot in the summer, you can't even ride them.
Yeah, okay. I have an image in my head of like the horse on a carousel in the dark, like spinning.
Well, I'm sure these are all images that we've seen in other things and they're just connecting.
Yeah. And because this is such like almost like a scrapbook of scary images.
It really is.
So our mind probably just like inserts whatever else that we've seen. That's crazy.
But it's so crazy that so many people are like, I've seen that too, as part of Are You Afraid of the Dark? And yet, it's not there.
Hey, listener, what do you remember?
Yeah. What do you remember about this?
Please tell us.
We want to hear. But yeah, so that's the intro.
Very cool. Thanks for breaking that down for us.
No problem. Anytime.
I love it so much. And I feel like I'm just happy that it now lives on our podcast.
It lives.
And okay, there's one more thing that I want to say as we're introducing this show, right?
Okay, hit me.
You even mentioned earlier the Twilight Zone in that early, or one of the alternate intros, potentially.
Yeah.
In my research on DJ McHale for the Tower of Terror episode, there was a lot of discussion about Twilight Zone because of that connection.
A lot of confusion
obviously.
on my part.
right? Because the movie has nothing to do with the Twilight Zone at all.
Right.
But DJ was a big fan of the Twilight Zone, and he brought it back to my attention. I think I'd read it somewhere online, but in, again, one of the interviews that I listened to.
I know what you're going to say.
He said that he did want to kind of give homage to the Twilight Zone in his show. So everybody knows, once you're starting any episode of Are You Afraid of the Dark, we see the Midnight Society around the campfire. We get whatever little jokes or information they want to share about the theme of the episode.
Yeah, to build up to the story they're going to tell, right?
Exactly. And before each episode, or each story, I should say, is introduced, the storyteller has to toss the magic dust.
The midnight dust.
The midnight dust, yes.
Yes.
And say, submitted for the approval of the Midnight Society, I call this story, and, say whatever the story is.
Yeah.
And, so iconic to me. I love that line, and it just takes me back to that time when I was excited, ready for a new episode, something scary.
And it sounded so cool, like you were part of the club. It
sounded so official.
Yeah, you're like, whoa, these are such adults, and they're 14,
They're the cool kids.
They're so much older and cooler than I am.
Man, I wanted to be in the Midnight Society so bad. But all that to say, he actually got that from the Twilight Zone.
Yeah, he did.
So before each episode, Rod Serling, the host of that show, would always say, submitted for your approval.
Right.
And so he wanted to kind of bring that to the level of the kids in this show. And so he adapted it to be what we know as the intro that the Midnight Society uses. And that's so cool.
That's so cool. I found that in my research for this too.
Oh, yeah.
I'm a fan of Twilight Zone, but I haven't seen every episode, so that hasn't quite stuck in my mind the way that this show has. So seeing that connection was one of the coolest things.
And I bet kids that were the same age as the Midnight Society when those episodes were coming out, they would know exactly what that was referring to,
Yeah.
So that's pretty cool.
Entertainment, there wasn't as much of it, so the stuff that was really big and really iconic, everybody saw all of it.
Yeah.
Or majority, I would say, more so than today.
It just didn't fade out as quickly. The market wasn't as saturated.
Right. So if they hadn't seen the original Twilight Zone episodes, they at least saw the resurgence in the 80s when it came back. So they would get it.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, they would get it.
But we'll have to see the Midnight Dust in action next time.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
We can't wait to talk to you about the Midnight Dust and everything to do with episode 1, or the pilot, really.
It's the pilot. Don't forget. Thanks for listening to this intro. If nothing else, it's a good little history lesson for you. So I hope you guys are as big a nerds as we are and enjoy learning about how these things were made and not just what was made.
Yeah, I feel like it's important to give the show its due, and it was really the first of its kind in children's horror to have a show like this. So
yeah, thank you, DJ.
We're excited to binge it with you guys.
Yeah. So watch alongside us.
Yeah, watch with us. Look for more episodes and keep the spooks spooking all through the end of the year.
You know what? Be the ghost you want to see in the world.
That's right.
Yeah. Cool. Thanks, guys. We'll catch you next time.
Yeah. See you next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Snick, past tense. You have snicked, we snicked, they will have snicked. It is post-snick. You can snick again next Saturday night on Nickelodeon.
Thanks for listening to That's Pretty Dark, written and produced by Christian Baxter Mott and Kaylin Andrews.
Our music is composed by Jonathan Simmons, and our art is provided by Paige Garland at Power Girl Illustration.
Join the collective nostalgia and follow us on Facebook and Instagram at That's Pretty Dark Podcast.
Share your experiences and let us know what shows, films, or villains still haunt you from childhood at that'sprettydarkpodcast@gmail.com. Remember, you're never really alone.
So until next time, sweet dreams, everyone.